Chapter 7. Sam, Saloon, and Ezra rode into Santa Alicia a little before midnight. They were wet and cold from the rain that had fallen earlier in the evening, stiff and tired from their long ride south on Pat Stevens Trail. The little New Mexico cow town presented a dreary and dejected attitude to the pair of travelers in search of shelter and hot food. The adobe buildings were grouped about a typical Mexican plaza, and only a few of them were lit at that hour of night. Sam and Ezra pulled up in front of the only two-story building in town and wearily dismounted. Their mounts stood apathetically at the hitching rail with the drooping heads. A weathered sign above the entrance told the travelers that they had stopped at the Palace Hotel. There was an uncarpeted lobby strewn with aged chairs and tarnished spittoons. A wizened Mexican was snoring in a rocking chair beneath the scarred pine counter. Flies hovered about his open mouth, and appeared that the only violent outdrafts prevented them from entering and settling in for housekeeping. Sam and Ezra thumped their booted heels loudly on the bare floor before the desk, but didn't seem to arouse the sleeping Mexican. Sam leaned over the counter and studied the situation intently, while Ezra forgot his cold and hunger as he waited to see what his partner's strategy would be. After comprehensive study, Sam cupped one hand and made a swipe at the horde of flies buzzing in the air above the sleeper's face, and he caught 3 of them and then crushed them lightly so they wouldn't fly away, and then delicately dropped them one by one into the yawning, toothless cavity. The Mexican snapped his gums together after the 3rd fly landed on his palate, and he swallowed hard and sucked in withered cheeks with a look of supreme gratification. "By gum, he ate him," Ezra whispered loudly and excitingly. "Did you see that, Sam? Swallowed him whole like a doggone fly-eating lizard." Sam pushed his Stetson back and scratched his head dubiously. "Well, maybe they're a special breed he raises here for eating purposes." At that precise instant, the weathered old Mexican erupted from his rocking chair. One brown hand went clawing into his throat, while strange gurgling noises spewed from his mouth. His eyes bulged as he spit out the first one bedraggled fly and then another. "Well, there they come," Sam Sloan told him severely. "That's what happens for not wearing a veil when you go to stealing yourself a few winks. Them doggone flies, they smelt your breath and thought they was diving head first into a garbage pail." Only 2 flies came out after repeated clearings of his throat and spitting. The Mexican stared at them in complete fascination and muttered, "Madre a Dios, she's not good for taste, senors." "Them others what you were swallowing must have went down without tasting," Sam suggested. "And now that you had your midnight stack, what's the chances for a dry bed and a stable room for a couple horses?" "Si, senor. This hotel, she's the best in New Mexico." The Mexican swept a pair of crippled flies from the pine counter with a magnificent gesture of unconcern, and swiveled a leisure round in front of his guests and raised his voice in a shrill shout. "Miguel, 2 rooms pronto." While Sam signed the register with flourish, U.S. Grant and Teddy Roosevelt, Washington, D.C., a sleepy-eyed, brown-skinned youth emerged from the yawning from an opening door. "Take these men and show them to their room," the old Mexican ordered. "Room 23. She's empty tonight, I think." The youth nodded sleepily and then turned in a long corridor leading off from the lobby. Ezra followed him, but Sam lingered at the desk. "What about our horses?" "They'll have the best, senor. Yes, yes." The Mexican lifted both hands and waved them in an effort to indicate the manner in which their mounts would be cared for. "Miguel will see your horses are made well with food and water." Sam nodded and trailed Ezra and the boy up the corridor. Miguel had opened the door of a cold, draughty bedroom and was lighting a kerosene lamp on a rickety table beside the double bed. He had difficult time making connections with his match and the wick because he was staring at Ezra's one eye with morbid interest. The signor is sick with the eye badness? He asked politely, as the wick finally caught up and flared. Ezra got his eye hurt when he was squashing a boy like you once betwixt his two hands, 'cause he was asking too many questions, Sam growled. Piece of a bone flew out of his head and jabbed him square in the eye. You best get out and tend to our horses before we take another notion. Might finish off blind himself if he squashes you as well. The youth backed away apprehensively and stared at Ezra's huge hands, which looked fully capable of mashing a bone out of an inadequate boy's head. He breathed. Si, senor, si. Then whirled and escaped into the corridor before Ezra could possibly get a hold of him. You sure tell the dangdest lies, Ezra said placidly. How come you hate the truth, like you do, Sam? Well, it could be I'm just out of practice, Sam sighed. Ain't had no call to think up lies back there in Powder Valley for quite a spell. He flipped the covers back from the lumpy corn-husk mattress and scratched a match on the seat of his pants, bent over to pass the flame close to the seams in the worn ticking. Looking for night crawlers? Ezra asked interestedly. I don't see none. Sam sounded faintly disappointed. We'll know by morning, though. Come on, Ezra said impatiently. Let's go chase out and hunt up some grub. My belly's so hungry, I'll have to be hunting some props to keep her from caving in if I don't stuff her out pronto. And a drink or two first would warm her guts up so they wouldn't freeze the foods going down, Sam decreed as they stepped out into the lobby into the still moonlight night. And then we'll see where we can find out about this Mose Higgins feller, and whether Pat's hit town ahead of us or not. They strolled along the hard-packed dirt sidewalk towards a low corner building where light and music were streaming under a pair of swinging doors. Half a dozen saddle horses waited patiently at the hitching rail outside. They pushed into the low bar room lit by lanterns swinging overhead on the bare rafters. A couple of men were slouched at the bar, behind which was a bald-headed bartender languishingly picking at his teeth with a gold spike suspended about his neck with a thin chain. The music came from inside, curtained off from the front. Sam said, Whiskey for me and panther sweat for my friend. He planted his stocky body at the end of the bar. The two men turned their heads and gave Ezra and him a long, steady stare of appraisal. Ezra nudged his partner and growled, Kinda looks like they're wondering whether we're even human. One of the men was tall and cadaverous individual, wearing blue overalls and a frayed white shirt. Beady black eyes were sunk back into the great hollows, and a droopy black mustache curled down past the ends of his wide, unsmiling mouth. His companion was a sprucey young cowboy wearing a black satin shirt with red polka-dot bow tie. He had blue eyes and chubby cheeks and a round, smiling mouth, and he was far from sober. He snickered as he overheard Ezra's remark. The bartender slopped liquor on the bar in front of the Powder Valley pair. They tipped their glasses and held them out for a refill. The tall man was whispering in the ear of his young companion, and the puncher kept glancing down the bar and nodding, his eyes round and owlish. Sam Sloane set his glass down hard after emptying it the second time, and he asked the bartender loudly, Are we the only white men that ever come to this place? The bartender cleared his throat and glanced dubiously down at the other two customers. The tall man tugging at his companion's sleeve and led him away towards the back room. The bartender turned back with a scowl. What do you mean by that crack, feller? Can't you see them two was white as well? Sam shook his head placidly. Well, the way they was looking at us and whispering, I thought we was plumb curiosities. Who was they? Well, the tall feller's Nate Ledbetter. He gambles some. Other kid is Ned Leroy. His daddy is sort of a high-powered political about. He's a good meaning boy, but he's as crazy as a loon.
Old Tom Leroy kicked him out of home a couple months ago and told him to make it out to shift for himself for a spell."
Sam nodded and said,
"Well, I reckon you're the feller I know would be looking for," he said to the bartender. "You know a feller named Moses Higgins north of town?"
An extraordinary change came over the bartender. He backed away from Sloane, and the friendly expression disappeared from his face, and he asked shortly,
"What do you want with Mose?"
"What's the matter what I want with him?" The rich mahogany color of the bartender's face turned to a pasty yellow, and he shook his head.
"I ain't meaning to get mixed up in Mose's trouble."
"Well, what kind of trouble is it?"
"I ain't saying this or that. Look, mister, suppose we say them drinks was on the house and you fellers just mosey along."
Sam scowled at him, and Ezra laughed happily. "Seeing that the drinks are on the house, what say we have another, Sam?" Sam nodded, and they shoved out their glasses. The bartender's hand shook as he spilled liquor all over the counter, and he tried to refill the glasses. He quavered,
"Are you fellers the one Moses has been expecting to hit town?"
"Well, go ahead and reckon," said Sam angrily. He tossed off his drink and walked towards the curtained doorway at the back of the saloon. Ezra followed him, after a wistful look at the whiskey bottle, which was still containing some liquor. 3 cowpunchers were awkwardly dancing with a trio of female entertainers at the rear of the room. The music was furnished by a tinny piano and guitar. Only 2 of the tables around the small dance floor were occupied. Ned Leroy and Nate Letterbetter was whispering over cups of coffee at one table. A broad-faced young man sat alone at another table and watched the dancers with sullen eyes.
"Well, looks like this is what we were looking for,"
Sam said to Ezra when he saw a white-jacketed Mexican waiter going into the kitchen with a tray of dirty dishes.
"There's food and music, both at once and all at the same time."
The waiter took their orders, a steak and fried potatoes. Ezra leaned forward and mumbled, "What do you reckon made 'em act so funny when you started there asking about Mose Higgins?" Sam lifted his voice to be heard above the loud music from close behind them.
"How do I know? It just proves that we're suspected all the time. This Mose Higgins is some kind of bad medicine. That's why Pat Hightailed down here like a horse with a turpentine under his tail."
The music ended, and the half-dozen dancers scattered off the floor to tables where they ordered drinks. The white-jacketed waiter was very busy for a short time. The sullen-eyed young man got up and came to their table as they started to wolf into the tough steaks and soggy potatoes. He pulled up a chair, dropped into it without invitation, and asked,
"Strangers in Santa Alicia?" "What if we are?"
snapped Sam, while Ezra carefully laid down his knife and fork and rubbed his big palms together. Young feller replied,
"Well, nothing much. My name's Adams."
"Well, ain't that nice?" beamed Ezra. "Don't believe I ever hit a man named Adams before, have I, Sam?"
"Deputy Sheriff,"
the young man put in hastily. "Oh, drats." Ezra's grin faded from his disfigured face. "Well, that sort of ruins things, don't it?" he queried anxiously of Sam. "I smacked a lot of deputy sheriffs."
"But none named Saddam," Sam pointed out. "That makes it all right."
"What's all this crazy stuff about?" demanded the young deputy, drawn back a bit, nervously dropping a hand to his gun butt. Sam replied gently,
"We're used to picking the company that sits at our table where we're eating."
"Oh, I see." Adams got up. He hesitated as though about to say something further, then turned and walked out into the barroom.
"Well, things are looking up," Sam observed happily. "If we could just find the mare now and spit in his left eye, we might get some real action.
I should have smacked him, Sam. I just didn't caught in his way at all.
Well, there'll be plenty of chances for that again, Sam comforted him. Pour that chuck down so we can get your strength back. I got a feeling we're heading right to the middle of a whirlwind without much compass to know which way's which.
The music stirred again, and the dancers swung back into action. Ezra scraped his plate clean and wolfed down the potatoes left by Sam, and was on the point of ordering another serving all around when the square-faced deputy sheriff entered the room by the side of a tall, hawk-faced man with a livid scar running diagonally from the outer corner of his left eye right down to the point of his chin. He wore 2 black-butted 6 guns tied low for a fast draw in open holsters, and there was a bleak, hungry look on his face as he walked directly towards the table occupied by Ezra and Sam.
"That's them," panted the deputy from one pace to the rear. "Like I was telling you."
Sam's chair lurched backward and he went for his gun. He wasn't fast enough to beat chain lightning. The scarred-faced man had time only to fire only 1 shot before the table, propelled by Ezra's foot, upended and dumped the crockery out of him. Then someone whooped and began shooting out the lanterns. End of chapter 7.